warming up as reporters from the other galleries are allowed to move over and get ready to hear his comments. As you know, the big development today is that Democrats now say they have 60 votes in the Senate. That would lead to possible Senate passage on Christmas Eve.
Let me just say,
let's listen now to the Senate Minority Leader.
They wouldn't be doing it this way. They wouldn't be jamming it through in the middle of the night on the last weekend before Christmas. And that really sums up, I think, what we've seen on full display here as they try to bob and weave and hide from the American people who've made it abundantly clear they do not support what they know about this bill. Now, we've got, as you know, a expanded version of it now. It's important that we are having it read so that we can figure out, like 300 million other Americans and all of you, what's in it. So I'm here with a message for the American people. This morning, Democratic leaders in Washington stood on the Senate floor and sprung a new piece of legislation on the American people that will have a profound impact on our nation. This is not renaming a post office. Make no mistake, this bill will reshape our nation and our lives. And Democrats are forcing a vote on it, as I indicated, over the weekend, counting on the fact that the American people are preoccupied with Christmas and not paying much attention to what they're doing. And the reason for that, obviously, is that we know from all the survey data that Americans are overwhelmingly opposed to this bill. This bill is a legislative train wreck of historic proportions. But they're so eager to claim a victory, they'll simply do anything to jam it through in the next few days. Now, we're in the process of reading this bill like a lot of other people, but here's a few of the things that Americans need to know. In Medicare, of course, we know that the bill slashes hundreds of billions of dollars from Medicare to fund a massive new government bureaucracy. We know there are cuts to hospitals. We know there are cuts to nursing homes. We know there are cuts to home health care. And we know there are cuts to hospice. With regard to taxes, the bill includes massive tax increases on American families and on American businesses. Doing that at a time of double-digit unemployment. Taxes that will make it much harder to create jobs as we try to come out of this economic slowdown. There are taxes on health insurance. There are taxes on medical devices. There are taxes on medicine. And there are taxes on working families with very high medical expenses. Abortion. The bill includes permissive language on government-funded abortions, language that would lead the federal government to violate long-standing policies on abortion funding. The Class Act, referred to earlier this year by the chairman of the Budget Committee as a Ponzi scheme, is in the bill. Medicaid. This is particularly interesting. The bill imposes massive burdens on states that are already struggling under the weight of the costs of Medicaid. At the same time, however, it gives special sweetheart deals to a select few states. Interestingly enough, two states that stand out are Nebraska and Vermont. So, what is the upshot of this for taxpayers elsewhere? Taxpayers in Kentucky, and even in Nevada, and Ohio, and Virginia, and New York, and Michigan end up, in effect, paying more so that Nebraska and Vermont can get a special deal. So our conclusion would be this, based on what we know so far about the bill still being read and analyzed, not only by my office, but everybody else in the Senate who hasn't seen it, and all of you. Our friends on the other side like to talk about making history, about the historic steps they're taking. The history that's being made here, make no mistake about it, the history that's being made here is the ignoring of the will of the American people. The history that's being made is that a bill that was sold as helping a major problem in our nation actually makes the problem worse. Because independent, nonpartisan scorekeepers tell us that premiums, taxes, and overall health care spending will actually go up under this bill. America, if this was a good bill with bipartisan support, I assure you they would not be trying to pass this the weekend before Christmas and in the middle of the night. And the reason I say the middle of the night, the next vote literally will be in the middle of the night. It'll be at 1 a.m. Monday morning. The presumption is, of course, that no one will be watching. If this was a good bill with bipartisan support, if we had followed Senator Snow's advice several weeks ago to sit down and write this bill in a way that it could pass the Senate with 80 votes, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. This is an absolute outrage that's being perpetrated on the American people. An absolute outrage. Americans need to know what's going on, and we're going to give them every opportunity to learn as much as we can and they can about this as the process moves forward. Take a few questions if there are any.
In addition to having the bill read, which is going on now, and insisting on all of your rights post-closure, will you plan to use any other tactics to try and make sure this bill does not pass by Christmas?
Well, you know, it's been my pattern not to announce in advance what kind of parliamentary moves we may make. I think the important thing here is for the American people to understand that they're being jammed. There's an effort here to deceive them, to try to pass this bill on a purely partisan basis at a time when their hope is, because of preoccupation with the Christmas holidays, that nobody will notice. Well, I don't think that's going to work. This issue is pretty darn big. All the surveys indicate that people are paying attention. They are concerned about it. As I said, this is not a post office bill. This is health care. And regardless of how old you are, every one of the 300 million Americans care about this bill.
Senator,
yeah.
Democrats are hoping that, on similar lines, they're hoping that you guys will agree to give back some time once if they get closer Monday, that then it'll kind of be over and you guys will eventually give back time without telegraphing any procedural moves. Yeah,
I don't want to get down in the weeds on procedure today. I want to talk about the outrage that has occurred here. This effort to jam and deceive the American people on the weekend before Christmas on an issue of extraordinary magnitude. And, you know, I think that people are rightly outraged.
That is Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell from Kentucky, Republican, in the Senate Radio TV gallery, talking about the latest developments on the health care bill. Now, to sort of reset the stage here, earlier this morning we heard from Democrats who believe they now have 60 votes in the Senate. They have crafted some type of compromise with Ben Nelson of Nebraska, who was sort of on the fence about this health care legislation. They were very concerned about whether or not they could get him into the fold. Harry Reid, the Democratic Majority Leader of the Senate, said earlier today that it does appear that he now has 60 votes to go forward. Let's listen a bit longer, though, to the Republican leader of the Senate, Mitch McConnell.
By first time most senators have had a chance to look at it. Staff is still going through it. I can't give you the final, definitive take on it, but I gave you earlier what the early indications are that the abortion language is not adequate.